Hey, welcome back to Bill Faith Unfiltered. I am coming to you from the Greatness Factory in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. If you're an entrepreneur, maybe even a budding entrepreneur, want to get into business, you need to check out the Greatness Factory. If you are in my community and you saw the Move the Needle event I did back in November, that came to you from right here in their amazing theater. The thing that I love about the Greatness Factory is the gentleman that created it. He is a legendary girls high school basketball coach, a legendary and really a super coach. If you know me, I do everything super, and it's a pleasure to be here. Super coach Micheal Burt, how are you today?
It's so funny that you said that. I was down in Miami once with Cardone, and it was back in the old days. This was like 10 years ago.
Right.
And he said, "I want you to come speak to my people while you're down here." And he said, "What do you want me to call you?" And I said, "I don't know, man. What do you want to call me?" And he said, "Super Coach." The Super Coach. So for many years, I had a podcast called The Super Coach.
I remember that.
And it was like a mix between, because it was easier than saying coachypreneur.
Coachypreneur.
That's what I used to say. It's like I'm part coach, I'm part entrepreneur, I'm coachypreneur. And it was always hard to say. So when he said The Super Coach, it's like, man, you're just coach on steroids. I go, okay. And that stuck for a long time. Yeah, it was a good concept. So I had a podcast called Super Coach. I did a show called Super Coach, and I was watching one of the episodes probably 10 years ago, in there in my office a minute ago. It was just playing up on my screen.
You're the super coach with the super facility in the Greatness Factory. This place is amazing.
Thank you.
But that coaching, I want to go back to the very beginning, right? So you, I believe at 19 years old, became a coach of a girls' high school basketball program. Was it Riverdale?
Riverdale High School, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I actually started coaching at 15 in junior pro basketball while I was in high school. I went back to where I went to elementary school, Woodbury Grammar School, at 18, and became the coach there for 2 years. And then I got a call to come to Riverdale when I was 19 to be the freshman coach. That was the first year. This was 96. That was the first year you could be a coach at a high school that did not teach. So while I was going to college, I was going to Middle Tennessee State University. I would leave Middle Tennessee State. I'd go 7, 8, 9, 10, leave at 11, and go straight to my job at Riverdale. They paid me $2,000 a year, and I was the head freshman coach. In the first year, we went 17 straight wins.
How did you do that?
You know, I was a point guard when I was a basketball player, right? I don't have your size. I
was a two-guard.
Well, hey,
6'6".
Listen, I was a little guy. I was scrappy. I had to think. My high school coach called me professor. I heard, Bill, from the time I was 6 years old, all through my childhood, when you grow up, you're going to be a great coach.
God built you to be a coach.
I heard it from, I'm talking 6 years old. Every coach I had said, son, you're going to be a coach. So when I started coaching at 15, I fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with the strategy, the connection to the players, right? And it just like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Now, why I was so lucky to know at 15, you know, I see some people that at 50 don't know, right? Or you know, look at that. There's like 80% of people live their entire lives and never locate their purpose in life.
Right.
Somehow, at 15, I go, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I was just naturally really good at it. But I fell in love with psychology at 19. I fell in love with inner engineering people. I was a deep disciple of Stephen Covey. Mm-hmm. Covey was very deep. It's not like the motivational people today. He had a deep methodology, body, mind, heart, spirit. So I began teaching every player the 7 habits of highly effective people, good to great, 5 dysfunctions of teams. This was very different. This is in the late 90s than other high school coaches.
Right.
So my boss, who was the head coach, very quickly said, this one is going to be somebody. And he retired at 52, and I was 22. And he said, I'm not retiring unless this guy replaces me as the head coach. So I get this big job at 22 years old as the head coach, the second largest high school in Tennessee. And I'm thrown in the deep end, man. Place that never won in 30 years. Had a few good years, but never won. Took me about 10 years. I think in my 9th year, we won a championship. And then it just became a dynasty. They won 7 of the next 9 state championships.
That's like John Wooden-esque.
In high school it was, yeah.
So I believe you were the all-time winningest girls basketball coach in the United States?
Yeah, at that particular school, I just had a very high winning record at that particular school. Now, where it ranks in the country is, you know, but at that school, I was probably the winningest coach.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, basketball was my first love before I fell into golf.
Yep.
And I had this epiphany in December, I think it was of 1988 or 89. I can't remember the year. You remember, do you guys have like the Christmas tournaments
Oh,
here?
yeah.
We had the same thing, and I grew up in California. I played at West Bakersfield High School. And I'll never forget, we were at Bakersfield High School, and it was the one with the bouncy floor, so everybody could dunk except for me at 6'6". And we played this team called Glendora.
Okay.
And there was a guy named Reggie who was their two guard, and my coach, Ron Loria, I got moved up from the Frostoff team to varsity to play in this tournament, put me on him. And I remember fouling out with like 2 minutes to go in the first half, and Reggie had scored like, I think it was either 51 or 52 points on me. And at halftime, I went in and I said, "Hey, coach, I think I'm done." He's like, "Yeah, you fouled out." I said, "No, I think I'm done playing basketball. I'm pretty good at this golf thing."
Yeah.
I was ranked like 3rd or 4th in the state. I think I'm just going to stick with golf.
Yeah.
He's all that's probably a good thing for you. And then I heard this story like a decade later, maybe even 20 years later, Reggie Miller talking about he scored 51 points in the first half of this game, and he went home and told his parents, and literally his sister, Cheryl, said, "Oh, that's okay. I scored 100, to top him." And I was the guy that he scored 51 on in the first half, and that was my last basketball game ever.
That's crazy. Well, at least you found your place.
It took me a while to find my place.
Yeah.
I have the same belief that you have. I think I was born and bred to be a coach. I became a high school or a college golf coach. My mother was a basketball player and a basketball coach and an education. My grandmother, my grandfather, the same thing. But I didn't find it till I was 39.
Yeah.
How did you know at 15?
God, it's like one of those things that you just know. Jeff Colvin wrote a book called Talent is Overrated. And the book is like, you look at talented people and you go, well, they must have been born with it. Tiger Woods, Mozart, whoever, Venus and Serena Williams, right? It wasn't that they were born more gifted than other people necessarily. They just found their gift earlier in life. And they had what I call a long obedience in the same direction, okay? Mm-hmm. So when I found my deal, I go, this is it. This is exactly what and I went all in, man. I mean extreme, obsessed. During my high school days, I mean, I would literally bring the players in at 4:30 in the morning. We'd practice after. I mean, stuff that's unheard of, right? And then I look back on it and go, was that too much? Like, was I too obsessed? But that's what it took to win at that level.
You know, I almost got fired from being a D2 college golf coach because at that time, our wrestling team was D1 in the Pac-10. And Terry was the coach, and I remember making my golfers run 5 miles and then work out with the wrestling team. And they're puking, and they couldn't walk the next day. I remember Rudy Carvajal, the athletic director, called me in and said, "Bill, what are you doing?" And I literally was, you talk about what you were being paid as a high school coach. That's about what I got paid to be a D2 golf coach. And I wasn't teaching, and I didn't graduate from college. I had a full ride to UCLA and dropped out to turn pro. And Rudy came in and said, "Man, your players are complaining and everything." And I look back and I have relationships with almost every player that played for me at that time. And that happened like every day. I was like the Bobby Knight of golf coaches.
Right.
And they love it today. They hated me when I was coaching them. But they respect it. And I think it molded them for what they needed to be prepared for into the future. Do you find the same thing?
Well, I think a good coach will have conversations with you that you may or may not want to have. Mm-hmm. They will push you to do things that you may or may not want to do, but they help you become something you did not think you could become. And what I have found is that I actually had to soften as I got into the business world because the kids were tougher than the adults were.
Right.
And so I think we've kind of lost what that coach-player relationship means. And people who hire me are hiring me to get them to another level, right? If they could get there on their own, they wouldn't need me. That's what I say. So I have a method. I have a structure. I have 33 years of doing this. And it's like, but certain people are coachable and they're flexible. It's interesting because I was talking to Jeremy Minor the other day, and I said, why don't people move forward with something?
If people don't know who Jeremy Minor is, I think he's the best sales coach out there today.
Absolutely. And he went to school to be a psychologist, and I'm fascinated with psychology. It's the one real regret that I have because I got all my degrees in leadership, management, education, but I've really studied psychology more than anything. And I said, why don't people move forward with something? If it's Bill Faith's coaching program or my coaching program, here's what he said. He said 80% of people have inferiority complex. They will come and listen, but they don't believe that they can really go do it. 20% of people have superiority complex. They will come and listen for the tools and the tricks and the strategies, but they actually believe they can do it without you.
Correct.
And I thought, what a dangerous place to be, no matter which one of those, right? But no matter which one you're at, you don't believe you could do it, so you got to be reframed that you can do it with the help of a coach, or you think you can do it without the help of another person. And at my level today, I see just as much of that as I do the other. People
Right.
who think they can go do it without the help of somebody.
I think I was that person
Yeah.
until I really invested into people
Yep.
that had achieved what I wanted to achieve.
Yep.
And I think it takes failure on your own to be able to realize that you do need help.
Right.
And you have a saying that everybody needs a coach. I believe that 1,000%. I wish I would have trademarked that before
Yep.
you. But I mean, I've invested probably close to I don't even know, somewhere between $2 to $3 million over the last 20 years into my adult education, masterminds,
Yep.
continuing education, everything you could ever imagine I've invested into.
Yeah.
And I think it takes one investment with the right person
Yeah.
to have that just kind of mold broken, because it's all mindset
That's right.
for us, correct?
That's
Wouldn't you
right.
agree?
And, I was having dinner with a guy the other night who has a $250 million rehab business, and he's probably, 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the takeaway for me, I was in California, and the takeaway for me was you can tell when people have been well coached.
100%.
When you're talking to people, having dinner with people, going deep with people, it's so obvious the people who have been well coached. Now, for him, it was Tony Robbins, and he went all the way to the top levels, right? People that have been with me for 5 to 7 years, you can tell how much more advanced they are. Like people that have been with you, like when you're sitting talking to me, you're like, this is a well-coached person.
You know when you see it, it's when you're at that $300 a person steakhouse.
Yeah.
It might not be in the boardroom. I mean, you'll see it there,
That's right.
but you really
That's
see
exactly
it.
right.
We had a mutual client. I'm sure you'll remember him, Ronnie Ramides. Do you remember him out of Louisiana?
Of course. Yeah.
And he was somebody, he would travel with his hats and have his hat. You remember that was his deal. And the way that he spoke and the way that he carried himself, especially when he would go from your side of the world back into the limousine world, which was a different world. And he stood out in that world because he had been coached.
Yep.
I agree with you 1,000%. How do you apply today? I guess it's been 20 years since you've been a high school coach. What similarities did you bring forward to becoming America's super coach?
The biggest one is intensity, persistence, intensity. When you study the habits of the top 1% of performers, okay, remarkable boldness, intrinsic motivation, great connection skills, grit and resilience, ability to lock in and see something through its conclusion. Great coaches have a lot of those, right? They know how to connect. But they also have a toughness and a grit and resilience to just keep trying to figure it out, right? But they also have that ability to lock into something. Like if I say I'm going to hit this sales target, I'm going to hit this sales target. Right. And what I found as soon as I transferred over, which was 31, I retired. I won a championship. I built this place, and then I had written 4 books at that time, and I was started to get offered 6 figures by companies, right? And remember, I'm going from high school basketball coaching to my first gigs with one of the largest home builders in the country. Right. 6 figures, and I'm coaching.
You're probably making like $25,000 a year.
Oh yeah, 50 at my peak, and it's like, okay, now I'm quickly growing this company. I've quickly went from 0 to 500,000 with just a few contracts, and I'm like, okay. And the first thing I noticed when I got into the companies, whether it be a $1 billion company like a bank, or a home building company that had real estate agents, they didn't have intensity. They were lacking of focus. They were lacking let's get up and go into battle every day. What they lacked was prey drive. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't call it prey drive, right? But it was like they didn't have a persistence. They didn't have an intensity. They didn't have anything. They didn't have a customer acquisition system. They didn't have an aiming point. They didn't so when I would go into these companies, we're setting an aiming point. We're prospecting every day. We follow up 7 to 15 times. Like some of them hated me.
Right.
And some of them like, damn, this dude is
Especially
good.
the sales reps and
That's
now have
right.
accountability, right?
Yeah, but here's the deal. The ones that love me, man, they made a lot of money because it's like, let's go. Let's get up every day and play offense. And in your podcast, I mentioned that when I was a basketball coach, let's get the ball to the midline in 2.3 seconds.
Love that.
Let's play offense, man. Let's attack. And let's just play so hard and come at people so much that they go, I quit. And that's what happened with my teams. So when I come to business, it's like, let's play offense. What does that mean? Let's generate leads. Let's follow up on these. Let's convert. Let's engage with people. Let's go to bed tired and wake up hungry.
I love it. We talked about in the podcast that I believe too many entrepreneurs that have not ascended to what their ultimate goals are don't focus on those revenue generating activities enough. How do you take somebody that hasn't been able to unlock their prey drive or isn't intense enough in their life or in their business and convert them to that mindset?
I would say the first thing is exposure. You and I have been around some of the best people in the world.
Correct.
We have observed, no matter who it is, we've observed how do they work, how do they communicate, how do they think, how do they play at a higher level. And what I've found that activates the prey drive faster than anything is exposure. If you want to know how to do something, get to the right place, get to the right table, and be around the right people, which is why at the Greatness Factory, people come in and go, okay, I'm wanting to do bigger things. I'm at the Greatness Factory. So exposure is a big activator, prey drive, environment. Then we get into like competition, fear, embarrassment. Those are activators. But truly, if I wanted to flip the switch, which was the title of the book, and Steve Carlos helped me come up with that title, by the way, because they wouldn't let me put prey drive on the cover. They thought it was too masculine, too predatory. They thought if it was in a bookstore,
Really?
people wouldn't understand it. And I've argued and fought with and finally Steve Carlos said, man, you're not going to win. Just give it up. He
Right.
said, what happens when the prey drive is activated?
It
Damn
flips the switch.
And I said, it's like flipping a switch.
He's really good at that
Yeah.
stuff.
And I said, it's like flipping a switch, man. And he goes, that's the book title. So that book became a Wall Street Journal bestseller, right? My first Wall Street Journal bestseller of the first 18 books I'd written. And because I wrote Zebras and Cheetahs many years ago, and Steve got me that book deal, but I had no idea how to sell it.
Right.
No idea how to market it. This time I went and hired Rory Vaden. Vaden had just launched Ed Milet's book. I called Milet and said, who launched your book? Because it was so impressive. He sold whatever copies on the first day. And he said, Rory Vaden. And I said, I need to get time with Rory Vaden. So I booked 3 hours with Vaden. It was $18,000. He's more expensive today. And it literally in a conference room this big, he writes 5 strategies on the board. And we execute those 5 strategies and boom.
On how to launch your book.
On how to launch the book. And listen, this is a game and you're about to launch your book. And you need to know how this game is played, right? You could write the best book in the world. If you don't know how to market the book, you never can get to that number.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I think too many people in the entrepreneurial world fall in love with their product or their service and they don't know how to bring it to market.
100%.
So they fail.
Yep. Well, I mean, I could fall in love with this place. I spent $7.5 million on this building. It's beautiful. It is incredible. It does not matter how beautiful, incredible, if I can't get people in the front door.
100%.
So it's like, it's easy to sit over here and go, well, why don't people just come in the door? Well, I'm competing versus Amber Sound and Industrious and Spaces. But I go, and I've created a whole new space. It's more like a private club.
Right.
Versus co-working. I don't want to be in the co-working space. I'm trying to generate, but now it's like, all right, now who am I competing against?
I see nothing co-working.
I know. It's not.
What I see is manifestation in this place.
That's great.
And I mean, I see a guy right there that I had the privilege of meeting beforehand.
Yep.
That can change the lives of thousands of people.
That's right.
With just what's on that counter right now.
That's exactly right.
I think that's the thing that you've done, and I think you named it perfectly. It is the Greatness Factory. But this is Greatness Factory Part 2.
Yeah.
Your first Greatness Factory was with the girls in high school, right?
Yeah, and that's where the name came from. And I'm really proud of the story of origin because moms and dad would bring me their kids at 14, and they would say, my daughter has a lot of potential, which is kinetic energy that is stored until activated. It's an idea of embryonic growth that will be better today than we were yesterday, right? That we'll never stop getting better unless we choose to stop getting better. And I would say, thank you for bringing your daughter to the Greatness Factory, where we are going to manufacture her greatness. And I used to say, when I'm done with your kid, she'll be confident enough to run for president of the United States.
Do you remember the first time you said that to a parent?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid.
Did they look at you like, what the F are you talking about?
Listen, you got to remember, Bill, I was 22 years old. I was a kid. I was a young kid, and I was just so confident, and people made fun of me, and I had a website, that I was a motivational speaker, and people made fun of me for that, and who does this kid think he is? And this is a football school. I mean, I heard that. You'll never win a girls' basketball championship here. So I literally something inside of me said, we're going to win a championship. And I started talking about it. And all the leadership stuff I was doing really was inner engineering the kids. Now, what's funny is a lot of my students are now students of my coaching business.
Right.
And they said, man, and they just talk about it. This is what Coach did for my life. So 2 of my best players are coaching students of mine right now.
It's kind of amazing. I think that a lot of people that probably knew you back then, would say, well, okay, he built great basketball players. But really, what a great coach does is you build great human beings. And at that age, you're transforming them into adults, right?
Yep. And at first, people couldn't understand. Like, why would we hire this basketball coach to be our business coach, right? Well, what they didn't understand is I'd studied a lot of business. I'd really been going over to the business world from the time I was 18 all the way through 31. I was studying how Malcolm Baldrig's winners, how the best companies operated, because something inside of me said there's going to be something bigger for you. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know I was going to go into the business world, but I had that entrepreneurial spirit, right? And when my great-grandfather passed away, I couldn't figure out where my entrepreneurial spirit came from, right? And my mom was a nurse. My dad worked in a factory his whole life, and they were not married. They married for 1 year, then divorced. And so I was like, where does this entrepreneurial spirit come from? And I went to my great-grandfather's funeral, and they just went through all the things he did. He was on the school board. He sold these things. He made these things. And I'm sitting there going, there it is, man. That's the entrepreneur. Like, I got it from that side of the family. My grandfather,
Right.
my great-grandfather, they were true entrepreneurs.
How would you describe, if somebody said, what is the entrepreneurial spirit, how would you describe that?
Just a willingness to have psychological flexibility. You got it because you've started, won, failed. Psychological flexibility is the willingness to move towards something even if you don't know what's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
It's high risk.
That's the thing that holds non-entrepreneurial spirited people back, right?
Yeah. It's like because I studied a lot of remarkable boldness. For years I studied confidence. Confidence is a memory of success.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started studying the habits of the top 1% of performers, not just 1% money earners. They actually convert confidence to boldness. Okay. Then I started asking. So I go around the country, and Jana on my team is former military, and she would travel with me, and she would say, I hear you talk about this remarkable boldness, but you never tell people what it is. What is remarkable boldness? So that made me think. And I go, it's really psychological flexibility. And that is the willingness to move toward a big goal, even if you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
I've never built a $7.5 million building. I've never done this before. I just go, we're building a greatness factory. We're in downtown Nashville. I failed 4 times. I always tell people it took me 8 years and $8 million to do this. I got kicked out of a building, and I would love to meet that project, that person. So I actually started this in the first Capitol building down on the river. That gave me 9,000 square foot in the 4th Capitol building, and it overlooked the river. It's beautiful. During COVID, I opened this thing up. I buy $250,000 worth of furniture. I do one event, and the landlord kicked me out of the building. Said, you got too much energy. Here's what they said. They said the other tenants don't want you in the building because you had 100 people at this event. And I'm like, well, maybe we should have talked about that before I did all this, right?
Right.
And I did talk about it. But I literally got kicked out of the building with $250,000 worth of furniture. They had already built the space out. And so I didn't fail there. Guess what I learned? I need to own the building.
Right.
I'm not get kicked out of my building. So, see, me being a tenant in someone else's building, now I'm placing my destiny in somebody else's hands. So when I negotiated this deal with Tony Giarratana, who's easily like the Trump of Nashville,
100%.
we negotiated me and him together. There were no agents. There were no brokers. It's just me and him. Now,
At Puckett's across
that's
the street,
right.
most likely.
And that was a lesson. That was a lesson from one of the top negotiators in the world. Like him raising $250 million per project, building the 505.
Mm-hmm.
He's built everything. Like me just working with him through that process was an education.
Right.
How did he communicate? How did he handle pressure? How did he negotiate what he wanted, what I wanted? And it was so pleasant. He's like, you want to buy this and we want to sell it to you. Now let's work toward that.
Let's figure out a way to do it.
At the very end, I had to come out of pocket $650,000 that I didn't think I was going to have to come out of. The bank changed some of the terms at the very end.
It's funny how that works quite often.
It's funny how it works. And Tony says, man, I'll loan you $800,000. I'll loan it to you if you want to do the deal, And I said, no, I'm going to put my own money in, but thank you. That's how good he was to put this deal together for me. Now, what has happened since we had this place? I'm on the board of directors of a publicly traded company that I think could literally be $1 billion company, AI technology company. We've raised $10 to $20 million of capital here. We've started one private equity firm, one data center. Things I've been wanting to do my whole life.
Right.
Has actually manifested. So when you said this is like a manifestation center, that's probably the best way anybody's described it.
I saw it the first time I walked in here,
Yep.
and I'd never been in a place like this before. And what I mean, I've seen cool office space like this. I've been in theaters like that. We can go find one of those in Vegas, whatever it is. But it's the feeling when you come in here. Something's different. You can feel like something's brewing in here. And every time, like there's only 3 people in here right now. Well, there's about 5 or 6 of us, right?
Yeah.
But I felt it when you introduced me to your partner.
Yeah.
I saw it when he was in that room with somebody else. I could feel it coming off the elevator. And those
Right.
are things that my wife would call women's intuition or gut feeling or
Yeah.
whatever. And those are things that, at least for me, drive me to make decisions.
Right.
I know that I want to have a deeper relationship with Coach Burt after the time that I've spent here.
Yes.
I've only honestly felt that with probably one other person in my life. Like, truly, I want to have a
Yeah.
deeper relationship. It's Pace Morby.
Yeah.
And Pace now is if I did a podcast with him at his house a couple months ago. And he's in my 5, what we refer to as our personal board of directors,
Yes.
right? And it's funny because I don't see him that often. We don't like pick up the phone and talk. We Instagram DM each other. We text. We communicate often, but it's not like that interpersonal deep relationship. And I think he feels the same way about me. I know he does.
Yeah.
So I get that feeling when I come into this place, and that's not something that you can falsely manufacture. You have done an amazing job in what you have built here.
Well, thank you for that. And I think it's a long obedience in the same direction. Wallace D. Wattles in The Science of Getting Rich called it the impression of increase. When you study the habits of the top 1%, I wrote about this in Flip the Switch. It's a very popular topic that people want me to speak on because I dissect each one of these attributes, really. Connection is one of those attributes. And when you study great cultures, it's trust, belonging, purpose, right? That's what people are looking for in a great culture, trust, belonging, purpose. So when we built this place, it's like, man, I want people to have an impression of increase, number one.
Right.
So the word that people use when they come here is expansion, right? We had a guy rent an office from Hawaii downstairs just for like literally 8 weeks.
Right.
He said, I'm in town. I live in Hawaii. He came in one day and he said, I have collected more cash in my business in these 8 weeks than any time in the history of my company. And I said, what was it? He said, just getting up and going to the greatness factory. There's an environment. There's an expectation. I want to win. And so I believe environments are activators of prey drive.
I think a lot of people don't put themselves in situations like being here. They don't surround themselves. We always surround yourselves with people that are smarter than you, and it's just kind of cliche, but you've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I think everybody that's successful has done that to be able to ascend. And then when you get to the top, there's a reason that you see Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, Russell Brunson, these guys hanging out together, right? Not just professionally, but also personally.
Right.
And those are things I think that people miss. I think you can learn through osmosis.
Yeah.
I think the manifestation is something that a lot of people don't believe in.
Yeah. Well, I look at skill. I wrote a book called, my most recent book is called 8-Figure Skills Stuck in 6-Figure Vehicles. And I have real simple formulas. I'm a coach. Find the primary skill, find the exact problem you want to solve, place it into a vehicle that can really go, right? And I call that the big table. Like, what is a seat at the big table? Well, very few people could tell me that formula. I'm like, what is your primary skill? What problem are you uniquely qualified to solve that fascinates and motivates you? And for years, I couldn't find the right vehicle, right? I would get into this business. I go, okay, it's a good business. And then it's like, what is the vehicle where you can go, where you can really go and use that skill?
I am just now doing that myself.
Yeah.
And, I've been in the limousine vertical and the real estate vertical. And as I told you, the book that I'm writing now that's I just got a deal on, that my vehicle will be not niching down as much as I have for my entire career.
Yeah.
I believe that I can see people inside people's businesses and be able to optimize them, change direction as long as they're willing to, and convince them to go in a different direction to be able to scale and achieve what they want to achieve. And it's taken me 51 years to figure that out. But I'm not going to give up. And define potential for me again. What is it? Being obedient?
It's an idea of kinetic energy that is stored until activated. It is an idea of embryonic growth that will be better today than we were yesterday, that will never stop getting better. Now, find the vehicle, find the skill, find the coach, and then have a long obedience in the same direction.
Long obedience in the same direction.
Yeah, that's a book title by Eugene Peterson.
Is it really? It's interesting.
Great title. Yeah.
Because I grew up traveling and sharing hotel rooms and stuff with a kid named Eldrick Woods, who was the 1%, in his field today. And when Mike talks about everybody needs a coach, people don't look back to Earl Woods.
Right.
And I lived it when they're on the full-size bed here and I'm over here and his dad is grilling him about his thought process, his pre-shot routine, the psychology, what he's trying to manifest out of a shot when the kid was 12 and 13 years old for 2 to 3 hours at a time. You talk about you, me being intense. The way that Earl was intense with him, there was nothing. There was no TV. There was no drinking water. There was no going to the bathroom. Once they were in, going through the dissertation, it didn't stop until they completed.
Wow.
Didn't matter if he shot 76, 64, set a course record. The process was the same every single time. And that goes back to, Green Beret from Earl. It's discipline. And it's repetitive motion that is leading to success every single day. I think that is what taught me subconsciously to my work ethic, belief in myself, positive self-talk, reassurance. And I think the positive self-talk is where I see a lot of adults missing because we as human beings default to negative thoughts.
Well, we call it the language of winning. And I have all these sayings that my team hears me say all the time. We go to bed tired, we wake up hungry.
Right.
You'll see them all over the Greatness Factory. It all goes to zero at midnight. There comes a time when winter asks what you've been doing all spring and summer, right? It's so what, now what? It's, it's these thank you, I owe you. You know what I'm saying? It's just these little phrases as a coach that I try to instill in my people. And one day Janice said, let's call it the language of winning. That's your language, right? And it's like I could write a whole book on that.
Is that going to be the next book?
Well, I probably got 50 of those, but it is self-talk. Right? Like the sewer cycle versus the success cycle, controlling the thought. Because people don't understand, if you have one negative thought, it produces a negative subconscious emotion, fear, worry, doubt, insecurity, vacillation. That produces a negative physiological effect on the body. You were a golfer. You understand all this.
The most public vehicle that you can see that is in professional sports. I'll just use the Atlanta Falcons. I don't remember what year it was when they were up like 28 points, 27 points on Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, and they lost because they went from being so confident, so positive in the first half to halftime, and something happened to where they became defensive.
That's right.
Most likely not from the coaching staff, but it happened within the players themselves. And then one small thing goes wrong, and they lose the confidence, and now they're defensive. I see that with business owners all the time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, playing not to lose. That starts with one negative thought. We see it in sports where people move into what's called prevent, right?
100%.
Football teams move into prevent. I know what it looks like because as a young basketball coach, when I didn't believe we could win, even though we were up, I'd go to stall. I'd move into stall, run the clock. And my players would look at me, and they're 14, 15. They're like, what are you doing? Like we don't need to stall.
We need to keep pressing. We need to keep running the court.
So now we start playing not to win, playing not to lose versus playing to win. And Zen Sear is a psychologist at West Point who really labeled this. The sewer cycle starts with the negative thought, negative subconscious emotion, negative physiological effect, tightens the body, right? 100%. Now I'm playing not to lose. Commission. I got to make a sale. I got to hit my number. The success cycle starts with that positive thought, has a positive subconscious emotion, excitement, enthusiasm, produces a positive physiological effect on the body. I'm loose, man. This is when I'm at my best. I'm loose. Last night I was finishing the day and getting ready, and I had to go put some gas in my car to come to the Greatness Factory. And there's a couple country music songs that they just get me in that mindset of like, I'm playing offense, baby.
How do you
like I'm a badass. Like I know what I'm doing.
You are a badass. How do you teach that to somebody that's not a badass?
I think it's got to be in proximity. I think there's got to be frequency. Like I look back at my coaching, 5.5 hours a day with those players over a 4-year cycle. I'm talking before school. I'm talking during the school day meeting with them. I'm talking pre-practice meeting, individual meeting, practice, post-practice, like evaluation, team room. Like that's how much frequency I had. Now it's like we don't have enough exposure to people, so they can't really get in that rhythm, right? Everybody's working from home. I remember a time my whole team showed up in an office that big, and we all got on the phones and we all called. And if you weren't on the phones, I could sit there and go, Bill, what the hell are you doing, man? Let's go. Like, we ain't got time to talk about these things.
It's a cliche, but proximity is power. I remember when we first met, you were driving around in your Sprinter teaching real estate teams, right? And you might get them for 3 or 4 hours, but you're not going to be able to fix. You can take the monster producer to the next level. But in that 2 or 3 hours, you're probably not going to take the Minnie Mouse producer to become a monster producer. They need to be in the mastermind. They need to be in the program around other people that are becoming monsters, right?
Right.
And I think that's a big mistake, that people that are looking to get in your program, my program, whatever it is, they believe they don't have the belief that they need to be surrounded by those people that are excelling.
Yeah, let's call that exposure, okay? I could watch Bill Faith on TikTok. That's not being coached by Bill Faith.
100%.
Okay. And a lot of people believe that, because I'll go places and speak, and I say, man, I watch your YouTube every morning.
I've learned from all your stuff on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram.
And
That's
I'm
not
like,
coaching.
no, man. Coaching is engaging people in a set of systematic behaviors that allows them to do something tomorrow they cannot do today. It is engaging over a period of time. If you really study mastery, right? Green wrote the book on mastery, Robert Greene. 4 to 7 years studying under a master. 4 to 7 years practicing what the master did. 4 to 7 years of becoming a master. That is a lost art in today's world. People want to grab a course and go do it. I studied under Covey for 8 years, right? Every book he ever written, all the certifications I could go through, right? I mean, I knew his stuff so well that when I went through the certification, the woman from Franklin Covey said, we've never had a person know this material better than you. They tried to hire me.
Right.
We want you to come train for Franklin Covey. And we've never done that before. And I'm like, this is my guy for 8 years, right? Then I went into strategic coach with Sullivan. And it's like I go deep with people. I don't dabble.
I think when you go deep, people can feel it. They're motivated.
Yep.
You unlock their prey drive.
That's right.
I think that apprenticeship is really what you did.
Yeah.
An apprenticeship with, in the 1800s, the wood maker, the whittler is teaching, the 12-year-old kid, and by the time he's 20 or 22, like yourself, you were going through an apprenticeship most likely when you were 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. When you were 19 and you became that head coach, now those girls are going through it with you for 4 years. They probably didn't know it at that time.
And this is actually where something that happened to me that a lot of people would see as a disablement is I was raised by a single mother, okay? She took me to the baseball field when she was working 2 and 3 jobs, partly because I wanted to be there, partly because it probably kept me out of trouble.
Right.
Man, I was raised by coaches. There was one coach who would tend to me. It was a woman, but was coaching Little League Baseball. She would feed me. We would get up in the booth and call the games. We would do this. We umpire. It's like that was really an apprenticeship. How do you show up? How do you have a good attitude, right? And it was really from a coach from a very, very young age. This is how teams are supposed to work. This is how a coach.
I didn't know that about you. I mean, I had the very same upbringing with a single mother, but who was a teacher. Probably never made more than $30,000 a year. We weren't poor, but I didn't miss a meal by any means. But I had that same experience with a golf coach and a big brother in the Big Brother program.
Wow.
And if I wouldn't have had that, that was really the early shaping, the manifestation of what they believed in myself that I didn't believe in at that time.
Yep.
And I think that's what propelled me to where I am today.
Yep.
And I think there's I think there's opportunities that we all have like that as human beings, but most of us miss them.
Yeah.
So we talked about on your podcast about kind of seeing those opportunities, taking advantage. I think a lot of our students probably miss the opportunities. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they need to, when you see someone who can help you, just, the first time you came back to the Greatness Factory, I made a note. I need, Bill Faith. He's a player. He's a mover and shaker. Stay close to him. Do things with him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like most people miss that. They like I introduced you to my business partner who's raised $1 billion over his lifetime. He's taken 50 companies from private to public. He's a CEO of a company that I think, he's a guy. So when I met him that first day, I go, I need to stay close to this dude, right? I need to stay close to him. It's like a lot of people miss that.
When you see that, then you can create your own opportunity.
Yeah. It's like, but people will come up and I'm like, if you see somebody who can help you, I don't know how I got in the room with a lot of the people early on. It was Bradley and Cardone, and then I got involved with Steve Carlos, who introduced me to all of these other people. Then I spoke at 10X and met Tim Grover and Tim Story. You know what I mean? It's like, then the next thing you know, I go from down here, a nobody, to now I'm in the club with all these people.
Right.
And it was really my skill set that they respected. They go, now that dude's got a skill, because skill recognizes skill.
100%.
Right? But something had to bring me in the game. Somebody had to go step over here, get in the game, right? And I still remember the first 10X conference I spoke at was at Riviera Maya, Mexico, with Cardone. I actually bought a ticket and spoke at the event. That's how good of a salesman he was.
He's
like, get your ticket, get your ticket to this thing, man. I'm going to get you up on stage. And we were.
I'm not going to make you buy a ticket to come and speak at my conference, by the way.
we were in Riviera Maya, Mexico. It's the original 10X. There's 40 to 50 people there. Cardone, Bradley, a couple other people. And I remember it like it was yesterday because there was people outside trying to get into the room because it was time for the conference to start. And they were 10X. They were jacked up. They were hardcore people. Right. And they called me back there, and Cardone said to me, what do you think these people want to talk about? And I said, man, I think they want to talk about 10X. Here's what he said. You go first. I go, what? He goes, you open the conference up. Now, we haven't talked about it. I'm in comfortable clothes. Right. I'm thinking I'm going to speak on the third day. And he's like, you open it up for the first hour. And I'm like, what do you want me to talk about? They came to see you. And he said, just tell them how you 10X your life. But I did. It's like, I can do this, man. Throw me in there. But that's where I met Bradley. That's when
That also shows the confidence that Grant had in you
to have you
do that.
He's like, dude, man, you could do this. Get up there and open it up, man. We're in Mexico. Go do it. And what was so cool about that event that's missing in a lot of events today is we would coach for 3 hours. They would coach for 3 hours. We would go out. Then we would go from there, go put our shorts on, go to the pool.
Right.
We all hung out together for 3 more hours.
That's where the magic happens.
Yes. We would hang out for 3 more hours, and people were over there drinking tequila and hanging out or whatever was in Mexico, and we're just sitting side by side with these people. Then we would go back and change and go to dinner together.
Right.
Now, this is when I knew I was in the big boys league. We would go to dinner, be probably 15 people, private invite. They'd walk in and say, get appetizer for everybody. Like everything on the menu. And I'd be like, what? Like everything? Okay. Then Brad Lee would say, what's the most expensive wine you got? And he'd say, get a couple bottles of that. Then we would just eat. And one of them would go, I got it. I'll take care of it. And I was like, I hope they don't call on me.
That's a $20,000.
That's a $20,000 dinner. And the next night I was like, oh my God, I hope they don't call it. Because I was just on the come up. And I was like, man, I'm at a level now where these guys are spending $20,000 for dinner.
I remember my first experience at the big boy table. And I had the largest limousine company in the world as a client, David Seelinger, a CEO of Empire CLS. We're at Milos in downtown Manhattan, if you've ever been to the one in South Beach. And we had about 12 people there. And we got some $500 bottles of wine. And my wife was there. She'd never been to a big boy dinner with me before. And she didn't know that I was going to have to buy because they were all my clients. And it was the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, Mike. It was about a $6,000 dinner. I'm just starting in my coaching business. Yeah. And I literally had to get, my credit card would not pay for the tab. And I had to get a debit card from my wife and then a credit card from her. We had to split it on 3 credit cards right in front of everybody. And it was the most embarrassing thing ever. And David gave me so much shit about that because he's got this, $200 million ground transportation company. And it was so embarrassing. And now today, I'm the Brad Lee guy.
Right.
And I love making people squirm like you felt and I felt that night. Oh, I'll order that $500 or $1,000 bottle of wine. Yeah, give me 2 or whatever that is. Yeah. But then I'll pick up the tab at the end of the night.
Yeah.
And it is, when you're around those people and the way that they carry themselves. And I think the biggest thing that I see the difference in those things is the conversations that happen at that pool. Yeah. The conversations that happen on the beach, the conversations that happen at dinner. And I know I've got a big conference coming up and you're going to be one of the keynote speakers there, and I'm super excited to have you. But I would tell people every day, and look, I'm spending almost $2.5 million on this conference, so please come. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you really want to have that immersive experience, they should come to your cabin with 30 or 40 people. They should come to my place in Montana and stay communally and be there 24 hours a day and have that true experience that we put together in these smaller events, because that's when I think lives really change. You get a taste at a large conference. Would you agree with that?
I do. And I think if people offer those experiences for you to go and go immersive like that, you definitely need to do it. Because some of it is just observation. I learned a lot by just being in a room and watching those guys. How do they operate? How do they communicate? How do they handle adversity? What happens when stress comes along? It's like a lot of observation. And when you can get people in relaxed settings like that, where you could really just not be rushed, have a true transformation, go there with an intention, walk out of there and go, okay, if nothing else, sometimes just come into my lodge or to your place in Montana. I can't tell you how many people come to me, man, I want to go get a lodge like this.
100%.
I've always wanted to have something like this. It inspired me. And then a guy in Michigan called me one day. He said, man, I went and bought a lodge. $3 million. He said, I have no idea what to do. He said, but you inspired me. And I said, well,
Right.
let's talk about that. Because now you got an asset. Let's use the asset.
100%. So you just said something. If you really pay attention when you're around people that have achieved what you want to achieve or have had some level of success that you're trying to get to, and you can do that in an intimate fashion, at the pool, in the lodge, wherever, not at a conference, not in a hotel room, you see how they act. You see what they talk about. You see what the conversation pieces are, right? I think for people like you and I, it's easier because you probably identified in the preseason games and in practice and putting them in pressure in practice when you were a basketball coach to see who's going to perform and who's going to handle that.
Right.
And who's watching who's dribbling left or right or can't shoot left-handed or do a layup or whatever. Those are things that I think become really important. And I was labeled by a gentleman as an opportunist in a negative fashion.
Yeah.
And I think that has a negative connotation to that word, but I am an opportunist.
Right.
I'm always looking for opportunity. I'm looking for opportunity to expand mine and your relationship.
Right.
I'm looking for opportunity in a business venture. I'm looking for new opportunities at every corner. Can that be taught? Can you teach that to somebody? Because I think you're an opportunist.
Yeah, and I call it an opportunity broker. You're really brokering opportunity. I do think that if a person has a basic desire to get to the table, right? Ken Coleman was here a few weeks ago, and he's got a show on, I think it's Ramsey's Network, and he wrote a real simple book called The Proximity Principle. He said, when my life wasn't where it needed to be, I was smart enough to know I need to get to the right place, and I need to be around the right people.
Right.
Okay. So to me, that is the first step. You're out there watching this podcast. You're like, man, where I'm at is playing at a low level. I'm sick and tired. Where there's no pain, there's no change, right? It's like what have I got to do to get a ticket? What have I got to do to get in the room? What have I got to do to go to this conference? What have I got to do this, right? And I hear people say, can't afford it. Listen, I borrowed the money from my own mother at 25 years old to get certified in Covey's 7 Habits. That one decision helped me make maybe $40 million. Now think about that. Something about being in that room for 7 days.
100%.
I backtrack it to that one decision. I got to meet this man. I got to be in the room. I got to learn how to do this. And I did. And I borrowed the money from my mother and paid it back $50 a month.
I love it. And it changed your life.
Changed my whole life. Changed my paradigm. It changed my paradigm. And, I came from a small town in Tennessee. I thought a paradigm, I always joke and say it was a paradigma. I didn't even know what a paradigm was, man. But it changed my paradigm. And I said, when I grow up, I want to be like this dude. I want to impact this many people like Covey did.
We all have the opportunity to change our paradigm.
Yeah.
We just have to want to do it and then have the drive once you figure out what that direction is.
That's right.
Coach, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you,
me
man.
on the podcast. How can everybody get in contact with you? How do they get in contact with the super coach?
Yeah, I think if you're on Instagram, it's at Micheal Burt. My mother did spell it Micheal Burt.
That makes it challenging.
Yeah,
Thanks, Mom.
it does. CoachBurt.com. You can schedule a call. TheGreatnessFactory.com is where you can learn about this. But you would see me going around the country. Man, if you're
You
interested.
speak a lot.
I speak probably to 200 dates last year.
Wow, that's a lot. And they can see you at strwealthcon.com. He's going to be one of our keynotes. You are not going to want to miss him at the Music City Center, July 22nd through 25th. Coach, thanks for having me. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for coming to the Greatness Factory.
Love it here.